Good evening again, everyone. My name is Archibald Gordon. Madam President of the Press Association of Jamaica, Dion Jackson Miller, and other members of the executive, immediate past president, and other members of the past executive or specially invited guests, Kenisha Malcolm Howard from the Washington Post, the chairperson of Phase 3 Productions, Dr. Marcia Forbes, Gary Allen of the RJR Group, Mr. Gary Sinclair from Flow, Oliver McIntosh from Digital Sports Max, as well Jeremy Slazak, Cleo Walker, Derry Gilzine, and the team from the U.S. Embassy, without whom this would not have been possible. Members of the Media Association of Jamaica, media managers, journalists, members of the public, ladies and gentlemen, all good evening. For the second time today, I have the pleasure of welcoming you to an event under National Journalism Week. This morning, in what I guess we called a morning of conversation, media workers looked at the challenges media houses face in the digital era. This evening, we turned the discussion on the consumer, hence our topic, modern media, competition, and customer choices. One only needs to note, as far as we are probably all aware, the concerns expressed about recent media mergers, acquisitions, and the like, to know that this is one area in which there is a lot of interest. And that interest is not just about why I can't see Empire on cable because TVJ bought the rights, or why Flow has dropped some channels, and whether that was due to pressure from the Broadcasting Commission, and Cordell Green from the Broadcasting Commission will be here a little later on. You can ask him that question, or why I have to play for Sports Max. There are plenty of questions about what it will mean for journalistic endeavor, as well as they say, does freedom of the press belong to those who own one? In other words, what does all we've seen happen and all we will likely see happen mean for the consumer? There's plenty to get through and little time to do it, and I want you to hear more from our presenters than you need to hear from me. So let's get the formalities started with a welcome from the PAJ President, Dion Jackson Miller, followed by Jeremy Slazak from the U.S. Embassy, and I'll be back to better acquaint you later on with our guest speakers.
Good evening, everybody. We are so very pleased to have you here, the members of the head table who have generously given up their time to be with us here this evening, or members of the public who have been coming in. It's so great to see you all. You might put it down to what I do for a living, which is talk, but we really thought it was important for the Press Association of Jamaica to assist in leading and facilitating national dialogue on important issues to do with media. And right now, I don't think there are many more topical issues than that of the media mergers and the constant development and reshaping of the media landscape. I just want to especially welcome. I see one of our past presidents, Ben Brody, in the audience. Always good to have our past presidents with us. Wesley Gibbons is here with us. He's the president of the Association of Caribbean Media Workers. The PAJ is affiliated with that association, so it's great to have him here as well. I want to add my voice to Archibald in thanking the team from the U.S. Embassy who really bought into this vision of having this national dialogue. And without further ado, I will allow you to sit back and listen and enjoy. Thank you again for coming.
I'm Jeremy Slazak from the U.S. Embassy. I am the Economic and Commercial Officer. So to your comments, Archibald, about some of your programming options on TV, we may have had some discussions on that in a different context. But I'm here in the context of being very pleased and happy to be a partner with the Press Association of Jamaica for National Journalism Week. This is something that we believe is very important. I mean, one of the primary objectives of our ambassador here in Jamaica is to embolden democracy and a robust civil society. And there's a very important role that a free and fair press plays in making that possible. And So, while we're having a dialogue about some of the relevant issues today, I'm very happy to know that we're going to have some perspectives from the United States that can talk about the context of this changing culture, the dynamic of change, of consolidation in media. It's certainly not new to Jamaica, and we're seeing it in the United States as well. So there's obviously a lot of lessons to be learned and perspectives to be received. But also, I wanted to make that point that, again, going back to the heart and soul of the important role that the press and the media play for a robust country, society, community, and again, I feel quite lucky to be here in a place like Jamaica, where I think there is a real appreciation of that. So, making sure that we have this dialogue that talks about the future of press, of media here. We also need to appreciate the fact that it is a role that is going to continue to change, it's going to evolve, but we need to stay true to the ultimate goal that we have, which is to keep this conversation going. So thank you again for allowing us to be a part of this, and I look forward to hearing some of the insight from our panelists this evening as well. Thanks very much.
Good afternoon. I'm so pleased to see this turnout. There's so many people here, and so many young folks. I'm so glad to see the young folks. Thank you for the introduction, and thank the Embassy for having me, and thank the Press Association of Jamaica for having me. I'm very pleased to be here. Yes, I am the homepage editor for the Washington Post. I've been there for about 13 years, and I've been in that role for about 8 years. And it's remarkable to see how far we've come in journalism and how much it's changing and how much things actually sometimes stay the same. It's an interesting time with what's going on in the media here on the island, because it seems like every day there is a new merger or a new acquisition, and what that does is it makes it difficult to stay competitive. So competition is is a major conversation that needs to happen. Yes, I'm tall. It will need to be lowered again. Yes, but staying relevant in this space when there's so much competition and so much going on. And like I said, I'm so glad to see the young people here, because that you guys are the leaders in journalism now. There are fantastic, seasoned, veteran writers who know how to do it, and I encourage you all to listen to them and learn from them. But it goes the other way around too. The seasoned journalists need to, and the media companies need to listen to the younger journalists coming in as well. They have great ideas. The space is changing. Social media is a different animal. Digital, online, mobile, tablet, all these apps, that's also different from print. And in order to stay relevant, these news organizations need to go where their readers are. And so you have to find a space in social media and online. How you do that? How do you stay relevant? In addition to going where your audience is, you also have to have a signature. You have to provide something. Your organization has to provide something that you can't get anywhere else. And whether that is outstanding video or outstanding journalism, because right now people can get news from anywhere immediately, right? So if people can get their news, if people can get the news, the facts, why would they come to your site? They're going to Google it, and whatever pops up first, that's what they're going to read. So you want to be able to get them to come to you after the news is out there. And in order to do that, you have to give voice to a story. You have to move into the analysis of the story. You have to pick out, you have to identify an angle and go in depth, because that's what people want to know. They want to know, they want to know what's next for this story. And we have to identify that early, or else we lose. We have to know where the conversation is going. We have to, and we have to participate in the conversation. So what the Washington Post does is, if we aren't breaking news, because we like to think that we're a breaking news website, but we're not going to break the news all the time. So the way we stay competitive is, when we haven't broken the news, we are looking for the direction that that the story is going in, and we latch onto that, and that's what we're writing about. But we're also hosting forums. That is another way that we sort of capture an audience, is by having online discussions about what the news events are. Multimedia. The young folks coming in, they are always putting up pictures and always putting up video, and that is very, very important. For the young folks in the room, get your video chops and get those up, because that is the way to go. When you're online, it's a very visual medium. Like, you don't necessarily go online to read the story. You may read the story, but what you want to see when you're there are photographs. You want to see video. You want to find the other ways that the story is told. And video is a fantastic way of storytelling. Video. Learn your video. The online forums, for the journalists in the room, it is not enough to just put out a story and then have readers comment. What the Washington Post encourages readers to do, or journalists to do, what I encourage reporters to do when they've given me a story, is to join the comments thread, is to go to comments and see how people are reacting to your story. And if there's a follow-up element there, jump on it, because readers are obviously engaged and they want to hear more from you. So jump on that story. Put yourself out there, make yourself available to your readers as well. Those are all those are all things that are going to keep you relevant and competitive in this constantly changing space. I really look forward to hearing any questions and hearing more from the young journalists in the room, either during the panel discussion or afterwards. I'd love to meet with you all. And I'm going to hand off to the next speaker.
Today I've been asked to talk about modern media, competition, and customer choices. I want to thank the Press Association of Jamaica for inviting me. It's my absolute pleasure and privilege to be here today. Let's get started with a little word game. So, I'm going to call the words. You're going to put up your hand if those words resonate with you. And we're going to start with modern media. What comes to mind? Digital. Remember, you put up your hand if it resonates with you. Digital, disruptive, mobile, multi-platform, convergent, cord-cutting. Sorry, Gary. I had to go there. Cord-cutting, competitive, collaborative, captivating. Yes, I see some hands are constantly up. Internet. What about competition? What words come to mind? Global, borderless, brutal, blurring markets, blurring industries, marked by mergers and acquisitions. Customers, come, give me one gene. Customers, demanding, Hillary? Diverse, affordable. Who is saying affordable? Gary Allen, affordable. Okay, so let's move on. So, we're looking at a 290 billion with a capital B in real dollars, so that's US, global television industry that has been disrupted by a mere 6 billion mobile devices, and a new generation of consumers that are demanding their programming when, how, and where they want it. Those aren't my words. Those words I read in the Harvard Business Review by Jay Samit, and that was just in July of this year. So, my call to action, first call to action, optimize your content for mobile now. Let's look at 3 images and think about each image within the context of today's discussion of modern media, competition, and customer choices. All right, so we know that's Ellen DeGeneres, and we know that was the Oscars last year. Selfie. What I really want to focus on is the word selfie. The Oxford Dictionary's word of the year for 2013 was selfie. We all know the modern technology that has made selfies possible. Very easy, front-facing cameras on smartphones. Smartphones have driven the creation of, if I said UGC, would everybody know what that means? User-generated, I see Terry Carell, who is big on this. User-generated content like selfies. So you just snap your selfie, post it to your favorite social networking site, whether it's a fast-growing Instagram that the young people love, the ubiquitous Facebook that the old people love, the ephemeral Snapchat that I just don't get, or the more staid Twitter that suits me perfectly. These new media platforms are near global and marked by competition. Truthfully, competition is an endearing and, well, I'm going to say endearing, but it's really enduring, but it's endearing for some of us, feature of modern media and modern life. This competition often leads to mergers and acquisitions from across all forms of media. Recently, Twitter bought Periscope. How many of you in the room know Periscope? Yeah, a lot, good, Periscope. Before that, Facebook bought Instagram and is probably still trying to buy Snapchat. And long before that, in 2006, Google bought YouTube. By the middle of 2015, Google had acquired over 180 companies. 180 Google. And the latest acquisition to date for Google is a purchase of Motorola Mobility, a mobile device manufacturing company. So, mergers and acquisitions are a feature of not just modern media, but traditional media as well. And in August, NBC Universal invested in BuzzFeed. Who would have thunk it? Competition is everywhere. There's even competition for the word of the year. Some say it was unfair for selfie to beat out twerk as a word of the year in 2013. No one remembers the runner-up. Still, everyone of a certain age remembers Miley Cyrus's twerking antics. And there, folks, laughing away in the corner while Miley twerks is a recently announced 2015, just last week, 2015 Word of the Year, the face with tears of joy, an emoji known as a LOL emoji or laughing emoji, a pictograph, which we are told by the Oxford Dictionary sums up who we were in 2015, who we were. So you see there's competition even in time because 2015 is already being pushed out by 2016. Last week, Oxford Dictionaries noted that emojis are an important aspect of modern media, which they say, and I quote, have come to embody a core aspect of living in a digital world that is visually driven, we heard that earlier, that is emotionally expressive and obsessively immediate. That's a quote from the Oxford Dictionary. And it pretty much sums up what customers are looking for in modern media. One, it must be visually driven. So please tell a story, paint a picture with words, or use infographics for those, like the newspapers, to make meaning of big data. That's a new buzzword. I had to put that in the presentation, big data. Two, be expressive. People really only love vanilla when it's served as ice cream. So be expressive. And three, obsessively immediate because customers want it now. And remember that the content is platform agnostic. So please tweet your content and put it across many, many platforms. So we come to slide number 4. On a Thursday night, long before I ever watched the first episode of Scandal, I already knew the names Oliver Pope and Huck. Olivia. Oliver. Sorry, Oliver. Sorry, Oliver. Oliver Pope and Huck. You're on my mind, you know, Oliver. They were tweeted mercilessly as to hashtag scandal, hashtag Ask Scandal, hashtag Scandal Gladiator. This popular TV series was first aired by ABC TV in April 2012, and Twitter, for me, has never been the same. This was a series that really brought social TV, a marriage of TV and social media, to my conscious attention. How many of you in the room know about social TV? If you're in the business of TV, you need to know about social TV. So, although Twitter is competing with TV for attention, it is also pulling viewers to traditional TV by way of social viewing. Modern media, then we see, can work in tandem with traditional media and can drive audiences to old media like free-to-air TV. Who can forget Tess and Chin and The Voice and the way NBC milked it via social media? So a new business model is tie-ins between broadcasters, tie-in between broadcasters and social networks like Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. That's a real business model now, and it's expected to generate market worth of $256 billion, capital B, US dollars by 2017. Social TV is really the new water cooler. My helper is my person who I bounce my presentations off. So when I read this to her, she said, Mrs. Forbes, so what do you mean by this thing is a new water cooler? And I explained how people used to watch a TV in the night, and then in the day they go to work, and they have the water cooler, and they'll congregate around the water cooler and talk about the programs. Social media is a new water cooler. It ramps up engagement and it ramps up discussions. In 2013, Media Monitor Nielsen reported a 38% year-on-year increase in tweets about TV, 263 million tweets. And in that same year, Nielsen launched its Twitter TV ratings. As far back as 2013, having invested in the requisite software and trained the staff, Phase 3 introduced tweets as well as Facebook and Instagram posts into live football. So you see, in Jamaica, we're into everything. We're keeping abreast. With modern media, your competitor can help you in business, and you can collaborate. That's a word we need to remember. Even leading cord cutter Netflix is finding a way to work with traditional broadcasters like ABC and others. So the university throws a creative idea at a creative team, and facilitated by green screen technology, coupled with teleconferencing software, and throw in a multi-camera high-definition TV coverage, the people at the university graduation this year were able to see Sir Godfrey Palmer in Scotland, unable to make the graduation platform, but he was beamed live and in living color to the platform. So let us take a quick look at that video. We're going to look for about a minute. Sir Godfrey is to the right. He is in Scotland. Professor Aline is in Jamaica.
Sir Godfrey Palmer, by the authority vested in me by the Senate and Council of the University of the West Indies, I have pleasure in conferring on you the degree of Doctor of Science honoris causa of the University of the West Indies. My sincere congratulations.
Thank you.
That was how the audience at UWI responded as well. Now, this thing that we call modern media, it means different things to different people. And you see on the screen there some of the ideas that people have, and bloggers, vloggers, podcasts, social media like Facebook and Twitter. These new media allow us, importantly, to express our creativity as content creators and to interact and share with others. With modern media, interaction is really a big thing. You want your customers to talk to you. Unfortunately, research has shown that we're not good at this, and newspapers in particular are not good at this. TV is a little bit better. In 2011, a sample of 46 newspapers 59 local TV stations, 7 TV networks, and 112 networks for news organizations in the USA. This person who conducted the study was Tracy Collins Stanley. She found that although these entities were using Facebook and Twitter to promote upcoming news, they were still maintaining their traditional blasting of one-to-many. They still were not interacting. Now today, we're in a sharing economy. Look at Airbnb, Airbed, and Breakfast, where you share your house for a fee. The author, Brian Solis, talks and writes a lot about shareology. It's not a nice word, shareology, but we get what it means. So collaboration is a new business model. And this isn't something new. Tapscott and Williams from 2006 was talking about social networks, and they're brand new as a part of a wider trend of mass collaboration, is how they described it. So my second call to action is collaborate when you can. Others see modern media as a set of digital devices and tools such as smartphones, tablets, and mobile apps that liberate us from dying concepts such as hot off the press newspapers. What's that? Hot off the press. Before they're off the press, Twitter has already broken the news. And we've seen those with millions of followers through the internet being facilitated to become people of great influence. The Kardashians, anyone? I can't manage them, but they're people of great influence to the youngsters now. So modern media is all digital in nature, and it can free us from anything that locks us into the schedule of a news or media organization. These modern technologies allow us to zap the TV ads. Any ad agency here? I'm sorry. And to time shift so that we get what we want, when we want it, where we want it, and via whichever device we want. News only breaks on Twitter. Live stream of events as they unfold in real time is what we expect now. The Paris bombing, it unfolded before our very eyes. Before CNN was able to send anything, modern media keeps us connected, and it shrinks our world. They shrink our world. We, the consumer, the customer, we have more choices now than ever before, and we have quad play, Gary. We want it all, and we want it now, Mr. and Miss Old Media. So go live or go home. Now, some of you, especially those who operate in the analog domain, you see modern media as mostly a nightmare. It wakes you up at night, and I suspect Cordell Green sees modern media as somewhat of a nightmare too, because he can't hold on to it and control it. It wakes you up at night, it washes you in cold sweat, worrying about whether you're going to survive in this rapidly evolving digital world where walls are tumbling and convergence prevails. With many forms of modern media, barriers to entry hardly exist now compared to former years. The problem is getting to scale. That's challenging, and competition is merciless and coming from all angles. Telcos, I'm sorry, Oliver, I have to joke here. Telcos, former friends of broadcasters, are now gobbling up their audiences as they launch cable systems. Some telcos may even have already started to redirect their advertising spend to their newly minted TV platforms. Other telcos have included production services in their mix as they seek to ring-fence the television industry in a bid toward vertical and horizontal integration. No telco wants to be seen as a dumb pipe. It's not hard to understand why some of these modern media as avenues are seen as fomenting dissent and unrest and allowing these to spread quickly. Think of ISIS and how fabulous ISIS is via social media. Fabulous in terms of getting their messages out. Please don't quote me and say the thing. I'm saying how they are used. I see the lady in black and red at front. Oh my God, she did not say that. Yes. So We want to go back to the good old days. We don't know what those days were. When we all listened to each other, when we all watched TV and radio dramas together and read the newspapers on cue during our train or bus or whichever commute. So let's have the key features of modern media, and you see them there. Anyway, as Tony Reese, Senior Vice President and Executive Director of Endelman Square, notes, quote, today all brands are media companies with their own audiences, content, and distribution strategies. Increasingly, too, individuals have become media brands. And I'm mentioning this because we need to be aware of this. Vloggers, Bella Blair, and Dutty Berry are two great Jamaican examples. They have their own audiences, they have their own content that they generate, and they have their own distribution strategies. They are real competitors to traditional media since everyone is clamoring for the same eyes and ears. So your customer can be your competitor. Let's have a quick look at the mashup video.
In a world where some singers are breadcrumbs, she is a good cheese patty and cocoa bread. This performer is on a BlackBerry, iPhone, Android type of level, and the haters them are some Bata A's Nokia 3310.
Hello, it's me. I'm a baby in the real sense of the word, don't you believe?
Me mama, me pop her.
Hello from the other side. I'm only trying to survive. Tell mom I'm sorry, can't breathe on my own. But where they have me is unlivable.
How much gear in your vice box so? Be a vice must come with steering wheel and brakes. My word! Shanita are kick it up a notch.
Okay, we have a voice. Let's use it for good. And we see the stats there. You can have a look at them. Dutty Berry and Bella. They're both university graduates, Caramac graduates, and I'm very proud of them. And here is a key point. Disruptive technologies disrupt behaviors. Customers with choices develop new expectations, new taste, lower levels of tolerance for certain things like technical difficulties and delayed broadcast. So let's have a quick synopsis of modern choices of customers, consumers, and audiences. There you have them there. You read them quickly because we're moving to the next slide, the important slide of knowing your customers. My students, I see them trying to snap quickly. I have a set of master's students here from Caramac. You will get everything that I'm presenting here, don't worry. The paradox of millennials, because millennials are going to be some of the key customers of media practitioners. They prefer snackable portions, but the paradox, remember, it's a strange thing. They want little bingy pieces, snackable, yet they will binge watch, and some say don't call it binge, call it marathon watch, because binge sounds like a bad word. They will binge watch an entire season of their favorite series. Social listening and social targeting are great tools for today's marketers. So you can look at your media analytics and see what they're saying. Online modern media allows us to measure with speed and accuracy. My call to action, know your customers and never take them for granted. So let's look at a quick slide about modern media and competition. Disruption of everything. Disruption of business models, disruption of media processes, disruption of delivery or distribution. So, next slide is, I'm going to lead into your panel. You see there the mergers, the acquisitions, the war over live sports rights, which everybody at the table know very well. Many will agree that mergers and acquisitions can deliver real gains to consumers, customers, audiences. They can do that. FCC Commissioner, and I want all the regulators in the room to listen because I'm not picking on Cordell. FCC Commissioner Maureen Hansen invites all regulators of technology to, quote, embrace two fundamental principles. One, regulatory humility. Two, a focus on evaluating consumer harm. As experts agree, consumers and the market are the final arbiters on the success of any merger. Here endeth my epistle. Consumers and the market are the final arbiters on the success of any merger. Here are a couple sources. I would not be an academic if I did not give you some sources.
Thanks to those of you who have been busily tweeting what has been happening here. Terry Carell, Garfine, Corv de Costa, the rest of you who have been tweeting, probably haven't been using the hashtag, which is why I haven't been seeing it. Yes, I'm talking about you, Emma. So it's PAJ Forum, remember. All right, so here's how we're going to proceed. We're going to have some comments and discussion between themselves by the panelists now, and based on the kind of general context we've heard so far. And I'll start at the far end with Gary Sinclair.
Thank you, Dehan. I'm going to keep my perspective short because I'm sure there are a ton of questions. But I think Marcel summed the space up rather well. It's incredibly dynamic. Stuff's happening all the time. You really can't sort of settle at all. 6 months ago, I was a mere customer of Flo's, getting all of my channels. And sort of unaware of a controversy. Today, I'm in a completely different position. The mergers, the acquisitions are happening fast and furious, and those just keep you on your toes from a commercial standpoint. These are big, well-run companies that demand a certain approach to commercial endeavor, a certain pace that is required, and a certain level of planning and sort of strategic development that I just find really interesting and that keeps you on your toes constantly. The competition that is going to ensue and going heat up is going in order to the benefit of customers, clearly. Has already in order to the benefit of customers and going to continue. Making customers happy, giving them more choice, giving them more affordable choice. And I'm just, I can't wait. Just like everybody else, I'm both a participant but a spectator of the space, and it's just really exciting. The space we're in as an operator and as a technology business is right on the cutting edge of consumer technology. All of the latest developments happening in consumer technology happen in our space, and it's exciting to be part of that and part of purveying that in the Jamaican market and continuing to try to improve that and overall improve the general lot of Jamaican people overall. So I'm excited to be here. Really looking forward to the cut and thrust and the give and take of the conversation and debate today.
Just before I move on to Gary, though, Gary, let me ask you, because we've seen Flow kind of continue to evolve. I mean, we started out seeing you as essentially as a cable company. Now you're very much a content provider. We're seeing you buying rights for sports and showing different content on Flow 100, which when it started kind of seemed like a kind of throwaway channel. Is it that you think that media companies of whatever stripe really are going to have to take on this issue of content creation if they're going to really thrive?
Yeah, I think so. I think everybody's realized how important content is. Well, first of all, how important video is to this space. This space is video dominated. Everybody wants to see video of whatever type. And so content is clearly going to be critical to any kind of strategic thrust in this space, and particularly from where we sit, sports content. Sports content is still really the only appointment content around where people really need to show up at a designated time on a designated day. You really want to catch live sports live. And so that content accordingly is getting more expensive, getting harder to reach because it's really, really compelling, dramatic content. And so we are about to launch a sports channel fairly imminently because we believe that content's king and sports content is particularly compelling to customers. So yeah, absolutely, we think content is key.
Gary.
Thank you very much for asking me to be here, and good evening, everyone. I think I should probably start at where Gary has left off, and I say that with a lot of pride because it's good to say Gary when it really is Gary, and to be distinguished as Gary when I am not Gary, right? And probably the second little point I want to make is to go back to something that Mark Twain said, which is reports of my death are gravely and greatly exaggerated, which is how it feels when you listen to some of the discussion about traditional broadcast media and what is happening. And it's interesting because I was saying to Kenisha this morning that the same day that the Washington Post was acquired was the day that RJR and the Gleaner announced that they had an agreement subject to their shareholders and a bunch of regulatory approvals, that there was an agreement to merge our media operations. And it's interesting that since August 5, the reaction that we have gotten is, well, let me start before August 5. Before August 5, it was, well, traditional media dying and you all have to do something and you're just gonna perish and people's shareholder value going to waste and so on. And then on August 5, this announcement came and all of a sudden we got this reaction, wait, you can't do that, what are you doing? What are you trying to do? It's too big. And I'm thinking, too big? What is too big? These entities, compare them with some of the small media operations in Miami, and we are much smaller, yet there's this reaction in this space. And to go back to something else that Gary said, we accepted long ago, I think it was from Marcia's time, which was before my time, on my second entree in the RJR group, we accepted that content is king. And so I'm hearing Gary say that now is interesting, because that has been the drive behind TBJ and how TBJ has transformed itself and placed itself in a position where the content that we now develop is content that we are seeking to monetize on different platforms in and outside Jamaica. So the discussion so far has been an interesting one, and I'd like to hear where some of the questions go and so on, because I think there are some key issues that we may speak to in this process tonight. I hope that we speak to the issue of how we intend, if we do intend to, build a cultural industry, if at the same time we are either going to continue to disregard or disrespect or advocate that intellectual property rights need to be redefined. How are we going to actually speak to respecting intellectual property rights for people from outside Jamaica and remove the channels? But if we resist that and say those channels should remain free, then how do you go outside Jamaica and ask people to pay for Jamaican content right, which is an industry we say we're building? I think we have to look at how we operate in this space. And I can't help it, Gary and Cordell, but to make the point that I find it hugely concerning that I remember when CVM was having their challenges with transmission of the Olympics, and when The Voice, which was talked about, was something that was being aired, when TBJ acquired the rights, there was this huge issue about access. And we need access. The average person must have access to these things because they are of importance to the national psyche. Gary, you have taken the Jamaican qualifiers onto a cable platform, and I don't hear a word from anybody about access or anything. And I think that we have to have the discussion in a framework that is fair and open and transparent about how it is we are going to function in this space. Because the issues are many. And yes, there are issues to do with co-opetition, as the Japanese call it, cooperating with your competitor. But we must come back to some point values, and they must be grounded in some things that we want for this nation. Because we can't tweet and we can't Facebook and we can't Instagram away many of the issues that we are still going to need to have national consensus on in our society. And that only comes through a certain type of formal communication. So we can't just tweet away some of the things that we have to do. So let's have the conversation, but let's not forget that there are some fundamentals that must still be a part of what is going to contribute to a sensible media approach, even in 2015 and beyond.
Oliver?
I'm going to say ditto. Thank you. No, I want to say good night and thank you for having me. You know, when we started our business about 13 years ago, one of our missions was to help to develop a media industry in the Caribbean, especially here in Jamaica where we're based. Over those 13 years, we have faced many difficulties, leading one being you know, people in Jamaica talk about the high cost of security for companies because of the situation with crime. Our third highest cost within our business is security, which is protection of our intellectual property. So we spend that with law firms around the 25 countries that we're in to protect against the breaching of the intellectual property rights that we buy. And as we talk about development of the media industry, you know, I see it as very difficult when you are a content provider, especially on cable platforms, whether it's Business Access TV or Sportsmax or TVJ, that, you know, how do you build a business when you can't protect your own assets and you don't have the devices to help you protect that? Gary mentioned, you know, the incredible dynamic nature that our media industry has taken in the last 18 months. 15 months ago, you couldn't tell me that I'd be sitting here as an employee of Digicel. 15 months ago, you couldn't tell me that I would have Digicel Play cable at home, where I have less channels because of our commitment to show authorized content.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think in the online world there's a phrase called throwing shade.
But I say that and you know, we laugh at it. But as we think about what's the importance of media companies and media content providers like we have in Jamaica and the Caribbean, the importance of it is in 2012, when we did the Olympics, and Gary made mention of the Olympic issues that CVM had. When we did the Olympics in 2012, and we broadcast that to 29 countries in the Caribbean and Central America, we actually took on 150 people to work on that Olympics for about 6 months, including students from UWI, UTEC, all universities in Jamaica, as well as down the islands. We took a team of about 20 persons to London to do that broadcast. There's no way that we can continue to do that if the intellectual rights aren't protected, because in essence, we're competing against free, and there's absolutely no way that you can win against free. So I think that the developments that have happened, the mergers that are increasing competition, we think is actually a good thing, because we actually think it's going to provide more choices for people. So when you look at our company, we are now providing content, not only over Digicel Sportsmax, but we are streaming our channel, we are streaming content that Digicel has. We're creating content where content never existed before by producing that content. But again, if that's going to be sustainable, we need to operate within parameters. And right now, the boundaries are quite blurred. And I hope that we can address that tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just to let you know how we're going to proceed, I'm going to ask Cordell Green to speak next. Then in the interest of fairness, Gary Sinclair to respond if he wishes to. After that, I'll throw the floor open for questions, because I know many of you have burning questions, and we do want to get to your participation in this as well. Cordell?
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I am put in a slightly difficult position because I represent a regulator, and like the courts, we are somewhat constrained and must conduct ourselves in a quasi-judicial way. So I don't have the liberty, certainly not
of throwing
in the public
shade,
space, of throwing words. As a matter of fact, because there are now two significant matters before the Commission, two matters having to do with mergers and acquisition, I really have to be very careful in what I say in this space, because you run the risk of your words being misinterpreted. And most of you know that I would usually speak extempore, but I have made some notes to guide me, and Junior, I would dare say, Junior Counsel, you would appreciate why that's important. I think what I have heard so far, if we look at the glass half full, it telescopes one thing very clearly, which is positive in the midst of all of what could be seen as negativity. And that is that, without question, the Jamaican media market is maturing. In a maturing media market, you have this kind of discourse, this type of contestation. I really don't have any dissenting view to express on anything that has been said, save that I believe, without question, the Berne Convention, in which we have grounded copyright matters over these several years, will have to be revisited. I do believe that there are some models that are patently outdated. That's part of the problem we're having. And some of these models, in fact, unwittingly help to support non-compliance. But I can say without fear of contradiction that in this region, and I would include the United States of America, if you do it in a relative way, there is no regulator that allocates as much time and other resources to this question of copyright compliance as does the Broadcasting Commission of Jamaica. As a matter of fact, we have had to ask our counterparts in North America to consider matters such as that raised by Bryant of IRA-FM to the Broadcasting Commission about a year and a half ago, that their signal is being pirated in the tri-state areas of the United States of America. And we have had to be pointing out to our counterparts that there must be a rebalancing of the time and resources allocated to these matters. So it's not a one-sided issue. Now, I want to say that I remain of the view, as a matter of sheer deduction, that too much consolidation is never a good thing. Simplicity. But I think we have to rethink these issues in the age of information plenty. It is not lost on me, certainly not the Commission, that mergers are being driven now by three factors. The need to be everywhere viewers and users are. People are multi-viewing, they're using multiple applications and platforms at the same time. There is a need to acquire appealing content that we've heard about, that no doubt explains the Digicel Sportsmax marriage. And as Marcia said, there is a need for people to transform from owners of dumb pipes to content creators. And businesses which were developed for a single platform environment clearly will find it difficult to transition to a multi-platform environment that many of us still don't understand. And I am sympathetic to the notion that mergers and acquisitions, that's a kind of quick way. But we must remind ourselves that it is not a panacea. It comes with very high risks, and it can be very disruptive to a market and also to subscribers and users. I want to remind all of us that in 2000 there was the mega merger. It is yet unmatched. The media giant, which was recognized as a media giant, was doing everything we said media should do, Time Warner, got very attracted to the internet superstar AOL. And we got that significant merger. 3 years after the deal, it ended up in the divorce court because the merger was running, posting losses as high as $99 billion. So I have somewhat in a counterintuitive view on some of these things. I am not convinced that large media entities, that's the media for the future. I believe they are relevant for now, driven by business survival imperatives. I don't know that that is always synonymous with the consumer user's interests, so I want to underscore business survival imperatives. But I believe that new media will be created, and it's going to take many forms. You pointed to Bella and what they're doing. That's a form of newer ways of communicating information. And I think the future media businesses will be multi-platform from birth. Personalized, customized content will be the value proposition for the future, along with shared infrastructure. Influenced by spectrum policy and spectrum reform. And my last comment on this for the moment is to remind everybody that the growth in the multi-channel video market is now being driven by smaller, independent outfits. And some of them are new media platforms. So I'm framing, because we were asked to talk about the future, and I know that there has been some notions about how media will look in the future, and it tends to mirror everything big, such as big data. I have a counterintuitive notion, but I will not be conclusive on the matter, because I think anybody who purports to be conclusive on anything having to do with the media environment, not in the long term, in the short term, would be mad.
Thank you, Cordell. Gary Sinclair, you want to respond to anything that's been said?
Thank you. Thanks, Dion. I appreciate the investment advice, Cordell, on big combinations. A couple of things. All right, so first of all, I'm going to try not to get into a fight with my good friends up here, Gary and Ollie. Look, nobody is more aware of the need to protect intellectual property and content than certainly we are at Flow. I mean, we've acquired the rights to the British Premier League now starting in the 16-17 year, and for the next 3 years after that, rather expensively. We spend, pretty expensive. So nobody is more aware of the need to protect intellectual property than are we. I mean, that is just one of the examples. Fact though is that the cable industry in Jamaica has evolved in a pretty peculiar way. And we were an amalgamation of a lot of the entities who were participants in this industry over time. We didn't just sort of drop from the sky. And so there is a process that we're engaged in now, largely led by our regulator, the BCJ, to regularize and establish clear guidelines for how we're going to operate as a cable industry. Because we spent the last decade creating a set of expectations that now have to be dashed. And rightfully so, in order to protect people's intellectual property, and we're engaged in that process as we speak, fairly closely with the BCJ. Nobody's been more upfront and out front on that issue, certainly, than me. I've taken all of the blows, all of the beating, rightfully, probably rightfully so, but it's certainly not an issue that we ducked. So, you know, I'm not taking a backseat to anybody when it comes to the protection of intellectual property. However, we're engaged in a process, and that process is painful, particularly to customers and subscribers. We're not unaware of that, but the conversation I think we need to start having is what is actually available for broadcast legitimately in Jamaica and what that should cost. And that's where I really think the debate going ultimately have to end up is, look, what's available, what's really available, and what should that price be? And I think that debate has already begun. My major competitor and I have unveiled triple play products out there in the market now, and the prices are pretty, I think, compelling and affordable. So that's where I think the debate is going to have to head. But I'd hate for anybody to believe that the context that we're talking about cable and the cable industry in now is sort of one that just cropped up over the last couple of months. I mean, it took several years of expectation creation, and to just dash that and eliminate it overnight has clearly been disruptive for customers. So we're going through the process, we're engaged in it fairly closely, and I suspect at the end of the day, like I said, where we're going to end up is, here's what's really available, here's what we're going to be able to go after, and here's what we think it really ought to cost. And again, that's a debate we welcome, and that we're going to be a part of along with our competitors, both on the cable side and on the free-to-air side as well, because I like that co-opetition idea, or whatever it is, because that is certainly the approach that we've been trying to take in ensuring that at the end of the day, the customer is the ultimate beneficiary of content in the way that they like to see it, for instance. So as my free-to-air competitors bring a particular type of content to the market, for instance, I mean, one of the things we'd love to do is bring it to the market in a different format for them, in cooperating as well. Because I think there is room for cooperation and not just sort of, battling it out commercially and with lawyers. I think there are ways. I think there are ways that we can cooperate so that the consumer is the ultimate beneficiary.
Okay, and speaking of the consumers, it's now your time, ladies and gentlemen. We have 2 microphones, one on each side of the room. Ron to my left and Archibald to my right. So just please put your hand up and indicate, and we will try to alternate from side to side. And I see Ben is first out of the gate.
The Gleaner Company is an entity which has different parts to it. It has a media component, it has a real estate component, it has an investment component. We are not involved in a transaction with relation to the investment or the real estate. The media aspect of the Gleaner Company is what we are interested in, and that's what we are pursuing. So the Gleaner has formed a subsidiary. That subsidiary has been named the Gleaner Company Media Limited. It has put all its media assets in that entity. It is the Gleaner Company Media Limited that will be acquired by RGR, not the rest of the assets in the Gleaner Company.
Okay, thank you.
Now, what happens when we acquire that subsidiary is that it will be merged into the RJR Communications Group. And it's being merged because we are not using cash for the acquisition consideration. We are giving them shares. So we are acquiring, but they are getting a part of us, which is why they are merging, because we give them half of the shares of RJR in exchange for it. So that's why I say it is both an acquisition and merger.
Thank you very much.
The structure is acquisition, but the form is merge.
Thank you very much. The reason I ask that is that I noticed that none of the speakers addressed the most important element in any kind of activity, and that's the worker. None spoke about the worker. What is the future of worker in this new media? What, for example, will be the fallout at the Gleaner Company, at RJR, when this happens? Who will pay workers when they go redundant? Will it be the Gleaner or RJR? That's number one. Number two, to help us along the way in this uncharted era that we're moving into new media, I think our guest speaker could give us an idea of how she progressed to where she is now, and what kind of organization exists at the Washington Post to protect the interest of workers. Thank you.
Ben, here's where I become very specific about this now. This is still a proposed merger.
What is the proposal for the workers?
I'll come to that point. I'm not ducking your point. It is still proposed. So let me make it clear that I'm not making any statement of policy, because I am still only the managing director of RJR. I am not the managing director of the Gleaner. And while I've heard discussions about what should happen if the Broadcasting Commission, the Fair Trading Commission, the Jamaica Stock Exchange, the Financial Services Commission, Tax Administration of Jamaica, and the shareholders of RJR and the shareholders of the Gleaner, if all of those approve, I hear that at the end of that there is going to be a position that some people will occupy. And at that time, someone can speak with authority on it. However, I will say at this point that from all of the discussions that have been had in the lead up to it, there is nothing which suggests to us that we are going to be any different from what happens in regular acquisitions and mergers. In that, yes, there will be some concern for displacement of employees. The manner of how that is addressed is going to be fair and square and equitable. However, we have been very clear from day one. We are not merging or acquiring and then merging to sit by as now this thing that has come together. We are coming together to be stronger so that we can expand. And we want to expand outside of Jamaica, because truth be told, media in Jamaica is not going to be something that is going to be profitable for much longer for most people. So when we are expanding, our approach is, in doing the rationalization of who may or may not go, then you look first at those persons who can be moved into areas for your expanded business. So yes, there will be some fallout, but at the same time, there will be sensitivity in terms of those persons who you can reassign and redeploy to minimize fallout in whatever way there could be. But I wouldn't come here and suggest to you that we are doing something that will be different from every other merger and acquisition, and there will be nothing that will happen in relation to any worker. But I give you my word, if I am the person who is going to be responsible for all of that, we will be fair to anybody. We will make sure that any person who will be affected will have all of the things that are recommended in best practices that should be done, including first option at being engaged or redeployed, and nobody will leave in a manner that is undignified. That's the best I can say, and I will carry that forward if we get all the approvals, and that's how I intend to treat with it.
Thank you, Gary. Kenisha?
So at the Washington Post, we have a guild that protects reporters and some editors. Sorry, is that better? So at the Washington Post, we have a guild that protects all reporters and producers who is what we call the online staff. We'll call them producers, and some of the editors the Guild protects. But our situation is a little bit different because the Washington Post was failing as a company. We just weren't producing the revenue that was needed to keep us afloat. So when Jeff Bezos now, the Amazon founder, moved in and bought out the Graham family, it was really a lifesaver. Before that, we had suffered so many layoffs and buyouts. And the Washington Post has a hard time firing people. No one was ever actually fired. We had voluntary buyouts. And there were people who were probably forced into taking a buyout. So you could call that firing if you want, but they were paid to leave. So it's kind of a different situation, but there are protections in place for the reporters that are there. Lots of people were reassigned, and if I could use that to sort of segue, I have a passion for young journalists. And when it comes to young journalists, you guys are learning things in a way that veteran journalists just weren't taught. And when buyouts come around, it was actually the young journalists who were able to stay. The more seasoned journalists, even those with followings, some of them just maybe perhaps felt like, it's my time. But many of the people who took the voluntary buyouts were older journalists. So that creates an opportunity for younger journalists. And that doesn't mean just because you're young you will stay. I say that to remind you to get your skills up.
Okay, while I check my age paper, Dashan has a mic on this side.
Gary mentioned that and the qualifiers, the World Cup qualifiers are on cable. But Flow is also advertising the Olympics. I don't know what has happened there as yet. Would the Olympics be free to air next year or would it be on cable?
Yes, well, I couldn't do a treatise on the Berne Convention. What I would say is that it is very clear to me that the rationale which led to that agreement, and very much in which intellectual property rights are grounded, and in particular copyright, which is the imperative to promote innovation, is something that is coming in now for serious interrogation. I mean, we do know, if you look at innovation, in many cases now, innovation is coming from consumer to enterprise, and not the way in which it had been done traditionally, which is from enterprise to consumer. Many companies are now having consumers determine, test, influence, participate in, invest in future products. And it is calling into question I want to be very careful in what I'm saying here now, because I don't want anybody to believe. Let me qualify what I have to say first by saying the Broadcasting Commission has recommended to government, in addition to all that we're doing with respect to copyright, that there be financial sanctions introduced, and that copyright infringements should attract financial sanctions at a level of $1 million Jamaican dollars, because we understand the importance of protecting intellectual property rights. But we also say that it is artificial in a digitally converged environment where the internet has whittled away time, geographical, and spatial limitations, for some of the constructs to be retained, such as release windows, where there are people in the United States of America who create content, insist that in a developing country such as ours, we allocate resources to protect that content, and are satisfied with notions that people in what they call Latin America, and I have to remind them that we are not in Latin America, and that socioculturally, for better or worse, we're more aligned with the United States of America than some Latin countries. We have to tell them that our people are not on the wrong side of the digital divide. They are not going to be prepared to sit around and be left to watch other people tweet about things that are happening now, and that they're expected to experience these things and tweet about them 3 months down the road. And we have said to people, look at what has happened to the music industry. There has been a revolution that has taken place. The Bern construct has been interrogated. The way we access and consume music has changed. I mean, I know not all creators are happy with the new arrangement, because it does affect the bottom line. But it has also spurned another aspect to the creative industries, which was faltering, and that's touring. So I am saying we have to look at these models, and it is in no way devaluing the importance of the creative industries, but we say to people in the creative industries, the business model must not undermine what it is we want to do, which is to value content. There are no over-the-top providers on the internet who are not regulated in the Jamaican market space, but they impact the Jamaica market space. Gary Allen competes with them, Gary competes with them, and we have to be thinking about how are we going to ensure that our local businesses, and here I now want to emphasize local, because we have been talking a lot about Digicel and Flow, and I remind everybody with respect that the cable industry in Jamaica was founded before government even knew about cable by our people, some of them normally regarded as semi-illiterates, but they understood technology in an innate way, and we suddenly saw wires in their communities. I remember being a university student. I considered myself fairly educated, but I couldn't understand how in heaven's name I was sitting on Chancellor Hall with people who were telling me everything that was going on the Oprah Winfrey Show, which I never heard anything about, and all the series they were talking about, until I understood that they were wiring up their communities. Government figured out that these communities were wired, and now we are regulating it. Many of these are mom and pop operations. They provide valuable service to communities that are underserved and which might never be served by major enterprises because they will not see the return on their investments. And we're arguing that the model that we must explore and develop is a model that should allow small, medium-sized, and large content players to survive. And the current model just cannot work. It is not doing that. Now, I don't know exactly what the solution is. We are talking to everybody. We have now elevated it to the level of CARICOM. I don't want people to think that the Broadcasting Commission is being reactionary. We have been at the forefront of copyright compliance for years. In 2003, before we had any Flow and Digicel and any of these people,
I was writing to the chairman of HBO pointing out that you cannot maintain the construct. And they have responded. They have created HBO Caribbean. We have seen Turner Broadcasting on the ground in Jamaica, working with our people. We need to bring some of the other major players on board. I see Fox has come. We have now recommended that at the level of CARICOM, we engage with the studios because we want to protect their interests, but we insist Jamaican people will not be left on the wrong side of the digital divide. And to be on the right side of the digital divide, we have to consider their aspirations and their realities, including disposable incomes.
I want to remind you that this is Cordell being restrained. Gary, Dashan's other question was for you.
No, well, I was hoping Cordell could sort of continue, actually. I really didn't want him to stop. The Olympics are going to be shown free to air. I'm fairly sure of that. We're going to have the rights to multiple views and multiple events, streaming rights, cable rights, exclusive cable rights. But I suspect that the Olympics, as is the World Cup from a FIFA standpoint, is going to be a free to air. Going to be free to air in a limited way. I think we're going to see everything we want to see, free to air wise, but it's going to be available free to air next summer.
The mic on this side is with Donald.
Mr. Allen, in a competitive environment where you are seeking to have the best product on the market, how much closer are you to accepting that you may have to share your media personalities in this economic climate and the changing media climate?
The last time that matter was discussed in terms of our management approach, we were very clear that we were not at that point.
The marketplace has a way of shaping the debate and the ultimate conclusion. So, Gary's at the position and his board's at the position they're at today, but you never know. Gary, I'm sorry.
Okay, before Oliver goes, though, I do think, Gary, we need to push you a little bit more on that, because I think a lot of people, for instance, are looking at models that are used in the States or elsewhere. They do see personalities across different platforms and maybe wondering why.
Well, if you want me to go into the discussion that was had in terms of both management and board, that's a little bit dangerous. But look, let's be realistic about some things. When we compare ourselves with the United States market with 240-odd million potential viewers to television and believe that we can import everything that they do into the Jamaican context of less than 3 million people, when we expect that in a market where there are people who work on platforms that are not seen in every state, not seen in every household, and therefore one personality on different platforms may not get national recognition, and we import that and expect that that should work in Jamaica. That is not the reality that we have seen. There are very few things, apart from the content that you have, that you use to differentiate your platforms in small societies. It is a differentiation strategy to try and attract, help train, develop, retain persons who give you a competitive advantage. And because And I think that there are some persons who have come at the point from their personal self-interest and some people who look at it from a company standpoint. From the company's standpoint, we believe that it is a part of the differentiation that we do between our platforms, and it is just not at this point something that we believe we should give up as a differentiation strategy. If that changes down the road, we look at these things all the time. There are something, there was a time when it used to be not at all. We have reviewed it, and the last time it changed, it was someone who is in print can be on any of our platforms. Someone who is in radio can, with an understanding, be involved with a competing television, or someone in television elsewhere can be on radio. It has been changing, but getting back to my original point, having examined it in the most recent iteration, we do not believe that we are at that point at this stage.
Oliver?
I think that, as Marcia just said, that it's an evolving situation. For us at Digital Sportsmax, we have adopted a model that our talent can work on other platforms and with other networks. You know, it's a strategy that we have chosen. Gary has chosen his for, as he said, differentiating reasons. And I think that, you know, as the market continues to evolve and as Gary is able to maximize his value out of his content, meaning that he can commercialize it properly, not competing against free, unauthorized channels, where he can then increase his profits and so forth, he can then relax probably or relent on that differentiating strategy. So it's one that we encourage because we want to see people work across different networks and across different products.
Before I go back to the floor, I'd love to hear Marcia's comment on that as well as Kanisha's.
Well, I'll go back in history since Gary already told you that I was there at TVJ before his time. And I mumbled to Oliver just now that it will evolve, and I've seen it evolve. I remember at Television Jamaica that we're quite adamant that no, Roy Forrester could not be producing the news for TVJ, the sports news, not sports, the weather news, weather for TVJ, and then under the quiet, producing it with somebody else fronting for CVM. We drew the line and we parted company with Roy Forrester. Fast forward to today, the real world today. It's totally different from the way it was. I left TVJ in 2003, where this is 12 years down the road, and I've seen, you know, people work across the platforms. And right now, I think the challenge for TVJ is that TVJ is operating a model now that is not sustainable. I see freelancers who might just freelance with TVJ being asked to comply not to work for any other media entity. And I hear, well, they're freelancers, so to me, they shouldn't need any real hard-headed authorization. And we've experienced at Phase 3 some of the backlash of this. And some people have said, well, to hell with you, I'm going to do it anyway. And so I think it's a model that will evolve, as Oliver has said, when Gary is able to monetize his content in a more sure-footed manner, because it really boils down to bottom line. If you're confident that you can make money with your content, then you might not be as hard and fast with your on-air personalities. I look at somebody like Terry Carell Reed, and I remember 2 years ago that I said to somebody within the RJR group, and I said it to Chris Barnes as well, that TVJ doesn't yet recognize that CVM is not its real competitor, that Gleaner was really TVJ's #1 competitor. From 2 years ago, I said this. And the more I saw Terry building her brand across the RJR TVJ platform, I said, I wonder if they realize that, you know, Gleaner is their competitor. So sometimes we see people who are not really our competitors as competition, and sometimes we see those who are really our competitors as not so. And it's an evolving landscape, and I'm positive that if we were to sit here 5 years' time, Gary Allen, TVJ, the Radio Jamaica Communications Group, would be singing a different tune. So there's hope, freelancers. Hang strong.
Kanisha, before I go back to the floor.
Well, I respect everyone's opinion and approach to this issue. I'm not even sure that I should comment because exactly, I need to stay safe. But it's completely.
Thank you.
there are two sides. In the States, and I will just speak about the Washington Post then. That's safe. I'll stay in my lane. In the States, the Washington Post it's a print and digital media company. So there is no broadcast element to it. There's no radio, there's no TV. But there is a lot of sharing that goes on in the States. So you'll often find many of our reporters who have been identified as experts on a topic or experts in the field, and they'll appear on cable shows. There'll be the talking heads, the political reporters will appear on cable networks, and especially in the campaign cycle that we're in now, you'll see a lot more, whether it's New York Times or Washington Post or even LA Times. When it comes to celebrity news, you'll see celebrity reporters appearing across different competitors' broadcast elements. So it can work, and I respect that you aren't doing that now, but it can work, and I'm...
My perspective will be more from an international perspective. So it may not be relevant to the Jamaican situation, but I write for an international organization. And my question is, I noticed in Canada, where I was a broadcaster there, I was told as a policy for the station that there is a 60-40 situation where 60% must be local content and 40% foreign content. In the Jamaican situation, I've not heard any of the panelists, and if I'm out of hearing, forgive me, please. I have not heard any of the panelists talk about, I've heard it talking about content in general. I've heard it talking about defending whatever content and whether you're paying for it or not paying for it implied. But I am concerned about developing a local market for local artists.
So if I understand you, is your question whether there should be a legislated ratio of local to foreign content?
Exactly.
The ratio in Canada is actually much worse than that. It's actually, when we applied for a license, we get around it because we're an international company, but the ratio is somewhere around like 80%, and then you have to get some leeway. But we are constantly asked a question about producing more local sport for Digital Sportsmax, and now we're engaged in the Issa Manning Cup. We're engaged in the high school football in Jamaica. We laugh about it, but again, it's about working together. So we're engaged in the Flow Issa Manning Cup, which we do in a partnership with TVJ. And we actually utilize services from Phase 3. So it all works together. We do the Red Stripe Premier League as well. We just signed another deal in Trinidad for high school football coverage. But the issue for us is that when we look at the economics of it, 1 day of production, just 1 day of production, can run you a bill of anywhere between 20 to 30,000 US. If it's done really well, you could run a bill of up to 50,000 US for 1 day. By the time you bring out the production unit, the talent, food, security for the truck for the night, and the night after, transportation, etc. In a world where we are able to then fully maximize and market that content and go to KFC and say, KFC, I am showing Manning Cup, or I am showing Red Stripe Premier League. Sponsor me. Give me a $10,000, give me a $20,000. KFC then goes back to their office, looks at that proposal, and says, all right, do I pay TVJ, Digital Sportsmax, the other sports channel, or I'm already getting my ads on cable, because my ads are on TBS, unauthorized. It's already on ABC, unauthorized. It's already on a slew of channels on cable, so why should I go and pay TVJ, Digital Sportsmax, or any local channel for that advertising? So what ends up happening is our sponsorship market is very, very shallow because they don't need to spend that money because they're already on television. Yeah. Unlike in Canada or the US, where they have to go out and buy sponsorship. So what that leads to is the content providers here, the channels here, going out and buying scandal and buying cheap content because we can pay $800 an episode or $1,000 an episode or $1,500 for a football match from somewhere in Europe or South America, rather than spending the $20,000 to $30,000 a day to produce it because we just have nowhere to go to get that money back. So, until the market changes and until those things are taken off air, then you really won't see a lot of local production and development of content here locally.
Well, this matter of quotas is something that comes up very often. I hear some people in the reggae industry have been very vocal about it. I have to say that I myself, I haven't taken a firm view on it, but each time it comes up, I wrestle with what is the mischief, because I acknowledge that Jamaica is a country that has a creative and cultural footprint internationally that bears no relation to her size and economic ranking. So I understand some other people, including Canadians, who believe somehow that they need to have a quota system in place to preserve what is Canadian. I'm sympathetic to them because very often we don't remember there's a country called Canada. I mean, that's a fact. It is a fact. And they get a lot of American content. And every time you talk about a Canadian singer, it's somebody in America, it appears, So I understand their difficulty. But I really don't have that problem as a Jamaican. And so I think we have to think through what the mischief is. I'm also a bit concerned about some of the assumptions made about quota systems, about redressing the imbalance of payout for, in terms of copyright, royalties. And I had to remind some people recently at the International Reggae Day that when I checked, much to my embarrassment, some of our most important catalogs are in fact not owned by us. They're owned by Universal Studios and these people. So I really don't know. I mean, to me, the problem is that quota is not synonymous with quality. The problem we have here is not about whether we are, exposing enough of our own music and videos and so on. It's a quality content. I mean, I say I am hearing first-class original content being created locally. I sit with my family and I watch children sing. I watch them compete intellectually. I'm just now watching a new series with some entertainer trying to compete with the Kardashians in a positive way. I don't know where this thing is coming from about there not being. We want more. That's what we want. But I don't know that this solution is the quota system. I also know, I don't want to be conclusive on this, but I believe even the Canadians they're rethinking some of what they have in their quota regime and relaxing some elements of it. And the last comment I want to make is that they have an entire department that is set up there, a whole ministry that is about funding the creation of local content. So it's one thing to talk about more content being created, but we have to also think about how we're going to incentivize it. And when we draw on external models, we need to be complete in the analysis. Having said that, I remain open to be convinced, but I am waiting to hear what is the real mischief.
Gary wants to weigh in.
I just wanted to make 2 quick points. One is to suggest that wherever we go in the quota discussion about local content, quota without sufficient intellectual property rights protection is nonsense, because you would not be able to sustain a business for 80% or 70% local content quota if you cannot protect that content. So the two go hand in hand. The second point I wanted to make was that I returned home from a stint in Barbados, almost 15 years now. And Barbados, the year before I left, introduced quotas. And they own, up to 2 years ago when Flow entered the market, they had owned the cable, the only cable distribution network for the country, as well as the only free-to-air television. And after 15 years, they have not been able to achieve 50% quota with government subsidy.
Okay, we're back.
Oh, and by the way, just one other thing. It's not that we are quota-free, because there is, in fact, a quota system in place for cable. Yes, for cable, for local channels. No, not just access. They're offering. There must be a percentage that's local. I'm not. You remember it, Gary? I'm not remembering, but there is actually a quota there.
We're back on this.
And there's the question also about filling that, getting enough channels to fill the requirement. I don't remember the percentage, Joe, but it's a percentage of their total offering. 5% is in my head, but I don't want to be quoted on it.
I wanted to sensitize the audience to an issue that for me is very compelling, and it has to do with ownership and control of media in a society like Jamaica. Even as we think about the kind of minutiae that we've gotten into, we need to remember, all of us, and consider and think about that media has a very special and important place in our society. Media sets agendas. Media influence social mores. Media has implications for the economy, and media influences politics. So media influences everything. And to that extent, it's not like selling fried chicken. Therefore, the ownership and control of media is very important. And to this point, Jamaica has been very smart in making sure that media is not controlled by special interests. Now, we have here structural changes in the media industry that is going to put a lot of control in the hands of special interests. And I'm talking about special interests, meaning the telecoms companies. Digicel, for example, well, you're calling it narrow interest, I'm calling it special interest. Digicel, for example, Digicel has been a wonderful competitor in Jamaica in your business, but Digicel is also a privately owned, foreign-controlled company. And Digicel has made it very, very clear that it has an interest in being the major media player in this country. Cable and Wireless and Liberty are also foreign-owned companies. Major companies, yes. Some of them have good reputations. Others have a history in Jamaica that we don't want to be reminded of. Now, do we really want to go back to what some people call economic colonization? And these are just arguments and issues that we must consider. You guys are the people who really make a difference insofar as setting agendas. Do we really want to consider economic colonization? Or do we really want something different? This is 2015. It's for us to make those choices. Thank you.
I didn't hear, Kay didn't phrase it as a regulatory question. It's really a national development comment that she made. Look, I am not sure myself whether the question ought to be on who owns or whether the question ought to be on concentration, whether there's too much concentration by whomever owns media. What I'm very clear about, speaking personally, Kay, is that regulators should not stand in the way when viability is under threat and when it becomes very clear that you will not have a viable media entity without some kind of partnership. That's very clear to me. I really think that the future might be less about some of these strictures on ownership and concentration, and probably will have to be more about imposition of very strong public interest considerations in licensing and approvals. And I do understand what you're saying. You're really getting to the question of the imperative of preserving cultural heritage and also the importance of media in democracy. So I think some of the concerns can be addressed, not just by rules on percentage ownership or defining who can own, but looking very, very carefully at the terms of licenses. And there are a whole range of considerations. Some of them now apply. If you look at the flow license, you can see us carving that out. But I know that you reference them, but you are really concerned about the domain in which they are now treading, and that it could very well go beyond demand pay-per-view services. And from that point of view, I'm sympathetic to what you have raised.
According to the presentations, I see where the focus was more on new media, but not everyone are drawn to technology. Most persons are accustomed to traditional media. Taking, for instance, the elderly. They look forward to reading the newspaper, especially on a Sunday when they are free. Are there anything that they in particular should be worried about if new media should overshadow traditional media?
Thank you. I was actually asked to talk about modern media, and that is the reason why I focus specifically on that area. But for the older ones of us who might not have access to the internet, that's a challenge that I don't see in Jamaica in the foreseeable future, because we have so many media entities in Jamaica that those who are not into the internet still would have access. There are about almost 30 radio stations in Jamaica. As Cliff Hughes, I see you in the audience there, as Cliff will bemoan the fact of so many radio entities, and that probably concede that they're all much of a muchness. But the elderly would have access to radio. The elderly, Chris Barnes assures me that newspapers aren't going, and Danville Walker in particular is quite, very confident when he talks about the Jamaica Observer, that it is here, that the way they have approached the newspaper, that it's not going to die. And free-to-air television, in answer to the question about TV, now Television Jamaica controls the lion's share of the television tube market in Jamaica. So fears of the elderly and them not having access to media might be a little bit early in Jamaica, I think. I don't think traditional media is about to die. And as broadband penetration increases in Jamaica, you'll find more and more of the more mature people migrating to the internet. The fastest growing band on Facebook right now are the people who are over 60 years of age. So I don't think we need to worry too much about the elderly in Jamaica not having access to media.
I'd like Kanisha to give us a perspective as well in terms of coming from a market in which the internet penetration is so much greater, and as well that you perhaps are a little further along the curve in terms of that kind of development. What are you seeing, especially with your older demographic?
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Forbes. I don't think it's time to. I don't think that we should worry about the elderly not getting the news. I mean, how it actually works is we put the content out where the people are, and we tend to adapt as users, as consumers of media. We tend to go where that news is popular, right? So the elderly, there will be no shortage of platforms for the elderly. They will continue to get, as Dr. Forbes said, continue to get their news from radio and television. And there will be those who will move online. They will have mobile. My grandmother has a mobile phone, and she checks the Washington Post every day. She's looking for me, but she's on there. She's on there. And when there's a desire to get content and get news, you're going to go to where the news is if that's what you want. As I mentioned earlier in our meeting earlier this morning, circulation is down. And while I do believe that, and I know this is controversial, I do believe stateside newspapers they're declining. They're on a decline. I'm very careful about how I say that because I know that's not necessarily the case here. But newspapers are declining stateside. And what's happening is that I don't know that they will ever die. Maybe they just take on a different form. It's my belief that they'll become more niche. There will be financial papers, and there will be exactly, just niche papers. I don't know that newspapers as we know them. I venture to say that they will go away as we know them. The daily newspaper with 5 sections, your local, your financial, your A1, your foreign, though that type of publication could eventually go away. And then people will move to other platforms. And I don't think that the elderly will have a difficult time finding the news that they want.
I just want to, excuse me, Madam, I just want to say that that's a very important question you've raised, and that's a matter that is not lost on the Broadcasting Commission. I do agree about the current state of affairs, but in our just completed strategic plan that takes us up to 2020, one of the areas we have highlighted for priority attention has to do with access, particularly for vulnerable persons, and that would include persons with disabilities and the disabled. It goes beyond just a matter of whether people read newspapers or access television. It can be as simple a matter as what kind of remote control do you make available as a cable company. If you have elderly people who can get confused by the PAJ, and where there is a plan to make a transition to digital television, the date being talked about now is 2018, and there's a specially carved out area to ensure that transition, when it takes place, that we make specific provisions for the elderly, both in terms of the information they must get about digital television and also the arrangements, the actual viewing comfort that they will experience. Okay?
Thank you so much, Cordell. I think we're at this side now.
My name is Anesta Samuels. I'm a student of the University of Technology as well as president of the UTech Journalism Society. And yes, some of our club members are here today. But I'm asking this question to the panel not just as leaders in your profession, but also as potential employers for us as young persons leaving college, we want to know what skills are being required in the job market in media currently and say in the next 5 years.
Smartphones are going to be the way that the vast majority of us access the internet and just media in general, entertainment, and the way to sort of navigate that right now conventionally is through the app. You know, there's an app virtually for everything. So app development, content development for apps is clearly something that is only going to get more and more ubiquitous, I think, and necessary. I would say certainly on the sort of technical side, you know, if you're coming out of school with sort of journalism and those kinds of degrees, clearly there is the need, as we heard earlier, for the development of online news, an online news capability. Because it's the way a lot of certainly millennials and people who are using their smartphones a lot are into online media. That's the way a lot of those people are getting their news. Twitter is a way tons of people get news about current affairs and anything else earth-shattering happening around the world. So the capacity to create online media, I think, is something that you want to look at. What I would want to tell, though, by and large, the average student coming out of school today is don't come out of school looking for a job. Come out of school looking to start something for yourself. Come out of school looking to create jobs for others. If we don't grow this economy, which we're going to have to do, it's not going to happen by sort of all the university graduates coming out looking for some big company to hire them. I mean, we're going to have to generate more entrepreneurship. We have to generate a group of graduates who are thinking about what business am I going to create in the new media space, in the online space, and how many people am I going to be able to employ? How many small businesses are we going to be able to create in order to get our economy going again? So that's what I would sort of recommend: is look for your niche to start something for yourself, and include a couple of partners, like-minded partners from school with you to start your own endeavor rather than looking to come out and get jobs. Because here's the real world that we're in, particularly in Jamaica: consolidation, mergers, acquisitions. The product of that kind of transaction is invariably what we call optimizing staff levels, optimizing operating models. And that invariably means shrinking the business, having people do more with less. So that's the world we live in, an increasingly consolidating world where, the idea is not that we're going to be, creating a mountain of jobs. There are areas that will, but in the media space, in the technology space, the issue is, unless you're an engineer or creating apps or creating opportunities for yourselves, the consolidation that's happening in our business is really forcing more attrition than anything else. So if you're coming out, you want to work in new media, you want to work in the technology space, you really ought to be thinking about how you're going to create opportunities along with like-minded partners for others.
We still have a very strong need for those traditional journalistic skills, which are intended to secure, investigate, to ferret out, to tell stories, to write properly, to write English, to present in English, even if we get folksy and casual and can talk about things. we still have those demands in our industry. We still have a strong demand to continue to survive by people coming in not just wanting to do radio or to do television, but we want multi-skilled persons to come into the industry. I remember the days when I used to write with a slate, on a slate. I remember the days of the 286 computer. I remember the days of the Olympia typewriters. This is the day when you need to be fully IT literate and fully skilled in information technology. So we are looking for those skills to come into our industry space still and to perform excellently. Even if you stay there and the cycle of the telecoms attracts you away from us after a while, we are living with that now. But we still need those strong journalistic and media skills.
When are we really going to start making some real money? And so I would say to someone who is now in media school, and especially if you plan to go on and do further studies, pay very keen attention to artificial intelligence. This covers a range of issues, including gaming. I actually believe gaming is going to become very much integrated with much of the content that now resides in a separate space. And as we are going to get people to stay on certain screens. And I think the young people who come with some competence in artificial intelligence will have some advantage. I think also data analytics. I actually happen to believe that that is, in fact, the future of media. The new media is now relying a lot on social media, on data analytics to ground its future. So content will continue to be king, but I hold to the view that the handmaiden will be the ability to provide people with content they don't even know they want, and to actually get them to know that it's available. And the student who grasps that and develops competences in those areas, I think will definitely be at an advantage in the future.
But I would still have to emphasize the point that Gary made. I cannot tell you how much of an advantage it is to be able to write a sentence in English well. All the spell checks in the world don't help you with an elegant turn of phrase and being able to express yourself in a clear and concise manner. And I cannot tell you how many graduates come to us and are unable to do that. And it's one thing to have all the technical skills in the world if that's where you're going, but if you're into content creation, that basic building block of English seems to be ignored far too often nowadays. Final comment was from the back of the room, and then we're wrapping up.
I just want Sir Cardell to explain or clarify for me. I've seen CVM Television done an expose on the whole rights. I think you were on one of those shows. You hosted one before. But I heard you in your presentation speaking about Jamaicans not being on the wrong side of the digital divide, and you talk about economic conditions and all of that. So it sounded like conditions precedent for some kind of a decision to be taken or not to be taken. So what I'm trying to get from you clearly is, as it relates to, and let me just zoom into, for example, cable operators and broadcasters and the broadcasting of channels. What is the clear and decisive position of the Broadcasting Commission as it relates to those?
Protect intellectual property rights. We must put it in a context where we need to break down barriers to access, particularly those which we absolutely cannot justify. Some of these artificial divides that people have with their release windows. We are very, very clear that local broadcasters remain a priority. Their intellectual property rights we see as sacrosanct, They might not entirely share that view, but we're going through some teething pains. And part of the reason I did allude earlier to our recommendation that we be given the powers to apply financial sanctions of up to $1 million for copyright infringements is the fact that we recognize the need to ensure that, in particular, the local television stations are protected. So we're not equivocating on copyright protection. We are not equivocating on the importance of our local content providers, in particular our free-to-air television stations. I want to underscore free-to-air because they provide a very valuable socio-cultural resource that we have to preserve, even as we understand that these copyright issues are not as simple as meets the eye, and we're committed to working through these issues. They require different approaches. There are regulatory approaches. We also have to be talking to people about new business models. We have to also be addressing this in the context of trade. And trade is not just about barriers in accessing cultural content, but we also believe that it is important to talk about our own creations and the lack of protection that we're hearing about for much of what we create in external markets. Well, you might want me to be more precise.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to, I'm going to have to stop it. Perhaps that we could continue that conversation right afterwards. I do have to wrap up. We are in fact over time. As Archie, I'm going to hand over to Archie to wrap up, but just to let you know that we do expect to have this session uploaded on the internet within a few days perhaps, and we will share that information so you can either watch it again or of course share the information. Thank you so much for being such an engaged and engaging audience, and thanks again for coming out.